It's soybean harvest season in Iowa. For farmers, this crop is everything.
Soybeans have got hit hardest.
It puts food on the table and takes care of their families. But now the outlook for their future is uncertain.
Family living budget is down to the bone.
All because of a word that's left them at the mercy of negotiations. And that word is tariffs. You hear so much about them, but this week we're going to show you the impact they're having in America. Both the negative,
you either have to pass it on or you have to absorb it,
and the positive.
We're seeing an upsurge in demand for our product.
This is The Race. Welcome to The Race. I'm Chris Stewart, and tariffs are a complex issue having complex impacts across the country. And during this show, we're going to take a look at how tariffs are impacting the average American when you think of jobs, to groceries, to the upcoming holiday shopping season. But we do want to get started where we are this week here in Iowa. We're on a farm that harvests soybeans, and this is a place where tariffs have really left their mark.
We bought this farm in 1901, so I'm the fourth generation on this farm. We grow soybeans, corn, alfalfa, pasture, beef cattle, and sheep. Soybeans have got hit hardest. They were the first products to get tariffs.
How have tariffs impacted your business?
They've brought in a level of uncertainty we haven't seen in a long time. China is our largest export buyer. Domestically, it's the livestock industry, but overseas, our biggest buyer is China. The biggest buyer of soybeans especially has been out of the market for a year and a half now. That dropped our price almost $2 a bushel.
With that price change, what have you had to do over the past year and a half?
We've really tightened the belt. You know, we've looked at every expenditure. We haven't purchased any equipment. We haven't replaced any equipment. We're doing more of the repair work ourselves. You know, the family living budget is down to the bone.
Has that been the case for a lot of farmers in Iowa?
I would say almost everyone. I mean, we're all in this situation together. It'd be like walking in your boss's office and your boss saying, you know, it's nothing that we did, but somebody else has affected our market. And because of that, you're going to lose 50% of your paycheck this next week, and maybe for the next couple weeks, and oh, by the way, it might be 2 years.
What's it been like to just kind of wait to have these trade negotiations happen?
Well, I mean, it's an emotional roller coaster because, you know, you hear them get together and you hear some positive news comes out of DC or wherever they're negotiating, and you have a little bit of hope, and then a week later it blows up with a tweet sometimes, or maybe the Chinese say, nah, we're not going to honor that deal. You know, the clock's been ticking for a while. We've made adjustments, and the market's starting to come back. If we could stay at this level, we could probably ride it out for a little while. But I would say another, you know, year and a half, 2 years, if we don't have a deal, things are going to get pretty grim.
Now, tariffs are also having an impact on things that companies import to sell or make products with. Alicia Nieves found how they're affecting small businesses.
And how are you doing? Did you find everything you needed?
2/3 of Americans say owning a small business is part of their American dream.
Do you do necklaces with that?
7 years ago, in the small town of Sharon, Pennsylvania,
Yeah, you'll love it.
Carla Infante made that dream a reality.
It was frightening. After I got everything all set up for the grand opening, I thought, what if nobody comes?
Despite that fear, that was never her problem.
That is actually considered a chunky yarn because it's fibrous and it's fluffy.
Knitting and crocheting enthusiasts have been flocking here ever since Never Enough Yarn opened.
That's all cotton there too.
Either for her variety
The yarns here are garment quality yarns.
or her knitting nights.
I have people who come regularly every Thursday night for our knitting group. Sometimes we knit and drink coffee. Sometimes we get a bottle of wine out instead of the coffee.
Sharing of patterns, ideas, and getting to know people.
It's been amazing.
As amazing as it has been to have a loyal customer base and consistent demand, Never Enough Yarn is closing.
The internet has really done a lot of injury to local small businesses, but when they put the tariffs in, that really pushed me over the edge.
There have been a half dozen rounds of tariffs imposed on Chinese goods over the past year and a half. The latest have really affected businesses like Infante's. the price of all her yarn and knitting supplies has had to go up. For example, just one knitting needle in her shop has gone up by $2 in less than a year.
First, it was, we'll wait and see. I thought when the first 50 cents came on each package of needles, it's like, we can live with that. I didn't realize it was going to keep coming. When that dollar came, it was like, I can't survive, and I just can't pass this on.
So before a new round of tariffs hit, she's ending this chapter of her American dream.
I made it 7 years, and I would have liked to have stayed a little longer, but I also know when it's time to go.
A lot of shops are struggling, not just Carla. We had one in Grove City. She went out of business. It's heartbreaking to see this go, it really is.
Analysts expect continued higher tariffs on Chinese goods could lead to 12,000 more retail businesses closing within the next year.
One thing I'd like to say to most people is if you don't believe it's happening, take a closer look, because it is. And if it hasn't affected you yet, keep your eyes open, because it's going to. It's going to affect everyone at some point.
And you learned that the hard way.
I learned it the hard way.
For The Race, I'm Alicia Nieves.
Now, we have heard so much about tariffs that it's hard to keep track of exactly what's in effect right now. So Annie Taylor's sorting out the facts on what's happening at the moment and what's set to happen in the future.
Chris, tariffs started on washing machines and solar panels back in February of 2018, but since then, that list has grown. Our partner PolitiFact says 1 month after the initial tariffs, the U.S. added steel and aluminum to the list, along with Chinese machinery, plastics, and electrical equipment. Tariffs expanded again in September 2018 to include more Chinese products. Another increase in early 2019 raised existing tariffs on stuff like clothes, shoes, and TVs. Experts predict all the tariffs add up to more than $4 billion per month. As for what tariffs are ahead, that's kind of a tough question to answer. Now, the U.S. is supposed to raise tariffs come December, but with all the progress happening with trade negotiations, that actually might delay the increase. So how does this affect you? 3 ways: income, the economy, and jobs. Some companies say tariffs force them to raise prices. Researchers found that people with lower incomes are buying more of the goods, and that means that they're going to be the ones that are more affected. I'm Annie Taylor for The Race.
One claim about tariffs is that China will pay the price, not the United States. So let's track the money here. Our animator Nick Rafferzo showing us where the money goes.
Let's start simple. What is a tariff? It's basically a tax on an import. It gets a little more complicated from there. Say there's a 10% tariff on lithium batteries imported from China. If a shipment costs $100, whoever's importing it to the U.S. would pay $110 to get it into the country. That money goes to the government, and leaders sign off on paperwork that says, tariff paid. But what happens to that extra cost the importer had to pay? In some cases, it gets passed on to the customer in the form of higher prices. In other cases, the importer eats the cost. That cuts into profits and could have other impacts, like offering fewer hours or putting off employee raises. But that's not to say China isn't paying a price. Its exporters have to weigh a couple options: discount the price to make up for the tariff, or risk losing a customer to a tariff-free option. Some experts say these tariffs will hurt China in the long run, as American importers find other sources. That tariff money isn't just piling up. The government has launched multiple rescue programs for farmers to make back money lost in the trade war.
French wine, Italian cheese, Spanish olives, those are items that tariffs are having an impact on. We're going to take a look at that, as well as talk about some of the jobs that this trade war is threatening.